Let me read the passage for us. Luke chapter 7, starting in verse 36. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. Two people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "Well, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." The word of the Lord. Now, this passage, we hear about Simon the Pharisee. It's the man whose house this episode takes place in. Simon, will cut right to the chase. Simon was dedicated to maintaining his status as a key religious figure in Israel. Even the act of inviting Jesus to this banquet at his home was a calculated move to uphold Simon's own religious position. It was going around at the time, we learned from Luke chapter 7, that Jesus was being called a prophet. And this banquet, most likely a Sabbath meal, was an opportune venue for Simon to position himself, to connect himself to Jesus, who was an up-and-comer among the people. Simon's problem is self-righteousness. Simon is fiercely committed to being seen as a religious person, to being known as someone who has the right interpretation of the law, one who holds to right theology, one who's associated with the right people. But what is underneath his self-righteousness? What, might we say, is the sin beneath the sin? Beneath the sin of Simon's self-righteousness is his desire to be in control. I know you don't know anything about that, right? His desire to be in control of his calendar, to be in control of his life, to be independent. Deeply underneath his self-righteousness is a desire to be his own, to be autonomous. And Simon is using religion. Simon is even using God as a means to his own end. This passage has somebody else in it as well. Jesus doesn't only interact with Simon, but he interacts with somebody else, somebody very different from Simon. Not only does Jesus interact with Simon, the self-righteous Pharisee, but he also encounters someone who is the exact opposite of Simon, a very irreligious woman. She doesn't even know how deeply broken she is. She doesn't even have the energy to think about how others perceive her. She's out of control of her life, and she knows at least that much. And she comes to Jesus just as she is, deeply needy. And ironically, both Simon and the woman want the same thing. Luke sets up this story to help us see that both Simon and the woman need the same thing. They need acceptance and connection with the Savior. And both are seeking that connection, but the irony is by the end of the story, the woman gets what Simon desperately wants. So let's step through this story in our remaining time and see how encountering the forgiving and accepting Christ exposes our self-righteousness and ultimately our religious idolatry. Luke chapter 7 is focused on one primary question. Who is this Jesus? What is his identity? And how should we respond to him? At the beginning of Luke chapter 7, a Gentile centurion understands faith better than those in Israel. After seeing Jesus raise the widow's son from the dead, the crowd believes that Jesus is a prophet. That's in the next section of Luke 7. After this, John the Baptist openly wonders if Jesus is the coming one. And then the climax of this chapter is the interaction between Jesus and Simon and Jesus and this woman of the city. The chapter comes to the definitive conclusion answering, who is this Jesus? What is his identity? And how should we respond to him? In verses 36 through 39 that I've already read, this is a description of a Sabbath feast, a dinner. And Jesus is the invited guest. He's the guest of honor. This is a public feast. And often in that context, the front door would be left open. So many people in the community would be coming in. It would be easy for an uninvited guest to slip in without being noticed. The woman probably stands by the wall, slipping in unnoticed and waiting for everyone to sit down. After everyone settles into the meal, the woman makes her move. Luke describes the situation, leaving no doubt about the woman's situation. She's a woman of the city. If there was ever a euphemism, there is one, right? She's a sinner. People speculate perhaps she's a prostitute. Let's just say that she wasn't invited. She was out of place. She was not religious enough. She was irreligious. She's an outsider. She does not belong. And she knows it. If her identity and her presence at the Sabbath feast was bad enough, what she does next will drive everyone present except Jesus crazy. She has the audacity to approach Jesus. You have to realize how they're sitting. I can't do this, but they're reclining on an elbow. Their feet they're like on a couch, right? So their feet are out behind them. It would be very easy for the woman to leave the wall where she was unnoticed, walk up and approach Jesus and to have direct access to his feet. Luke tells us that as she comes up behind Jesus, she begins to weep. And this is no light whimpering, because the word that describes she starts to weep and she wets his feet. That very word elsewhere in the New Testament describes rain showers. So it's a thunderstorm of tears. Snot's running out of her nose. You know the moment, right? We're all very uncomfortable right now. Somebody is oversharing emotion. I don't want to be here any longer. But the woman is totally unaware, right? She's not thinking of perception. She sees Jesus, and overwhelmed with gratitude, overwhelmed with emotion, she approaches him. She begins to wet his feet with her tears. She takes out a jar, we're told, made out of the soft stone of alabaster. She breaks the top off. This kind of stone doesn't have a cap on the jar, right? You break the top off, and once you break it off, you're going to use it all, right? And she brings this expensive perfume, something that she had planned on bringing with her, and anoints Jesus' feet and continues to weep. And then she dries his feet off with her hair. This tells me she wasn't anticipating crying. She just was going to anoint him, but overcome by emotion. She didn't bring a towel, right? She wasn't prepared, but she improvised. She wiped the ointment into his feet and the tears off of his feet with her own hair. She knows how lost she is. She knows how needy she has been. She knows that she sticks out in this refined religious crowd. I think we read texts like this and they don't penetrate us, so this could be dangerous. But the uncomfortable situation is something like if Clint Arnold, our dean, would be singled out in Metzger Square or the Quad out there, and some young Biola student, maybe a female, would come up and start giving him a back rub in front of everybody, we would kind of start thinking, well, that's a little odd. In fact, I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable telling you right now, right? But it's that kind of awkward moment. Wait, no, you and you, no. This is like dangerous. This is scandalous, right? It's my reputation is at stake. And the next part of the story, that's exactly what Simon is thinking. Simon passes silent judgment in his own heart. If he were really a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. You understand the religious kind of context here is that this woman is unclean. She is contagious. She is contamination. And as she touches Jesus, Simon thinks, oh, disqualified. Because Simon is playing a religious game, right? And Jesus isn't playing with him. And Simon passes silent judgment upon Jesus. And you know what happens next in the story? It's always bad news when Jesus reads your mind. That's a great thing to know when you're reading the Gospels. If Jesus knows what you're thinking without you saying it, it's going to be like the atomic elbow from the turnbuckle, right? It's WWF, and Jesus is going to win. Jesus confronts Simon in his silent judgment and tells him a parable. And you know the parable, it's about two men who owe different amounts of money to the same money lender, but both are forgiven. Simon is clever enough to know, okay, I see where the parable goes, but I love I don't love it, but it's the snarkiness that Simon speaks back to Jesus. Well, I suppose, right, who loved him more? Well, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. I think Simon knows that the atomic elbow's coming. He's like, okay, I'm going to get trapped. I know it. I know the answer to the parable, though. I know that the guy who owed a lot of money, when he's forgiven, he's going to be very grateful. He's going to love a lot. Now, it's at this point that the plot thickens. It's at this point that I think the dramatic narrative of this story begins to heighten to its climax. I want to reread part of the passage after Simon says, okay, it's probably the guy who owed more money. That's verse 40 and 41. Oh, I'm sorry, no, after that, 43. Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. Jesus says, you have judged correctly. But then watch this little detail I'd never seen before, crucial for this passage. In verse 44 it says, and then Jesus turned toward the woman and spoke to Simon. Weird, right? He's looking at the woman with love and affection, but he's lowering the atomic elbow on Simon, that makes you feel really weird, right? When you're being spoken to, but he's looking at somebody else. And listen to what Jesus says. Turning to the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? He's looking at the woman. Do you see this woman? I came into your house and you did not give me water for my feet. But she wet my feet with her tears, wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Do you know what Jesus is saying here? These are all elements of hospitality. They're all ways of receiving a guest and loving and honoring that guest. You hear Simon's self-righteous intentions are unmasked because he wants to be associated with Jesus, but he fails to give Jesus the hospitable welcome. Though Simon had invited Jesus into his home, he had not given him the treatment due an honored guest. It would have been expected in the ancient world that a host would have at least provided water for the guest to wash his own feet. But instead of Simon, it was the woman who gave signs of hospitality and welcomed Jesus. She not only offered water to wash, but washed his feet with her tears. She not only offered kisses of welcome on the cheek, but she did not stop kissing his very feet. She did not only anoint Jesus with oil, she so perfumed him that his fragrance would be smelled all over the place. What we're seeing in this description is extravagant love. Extravagant love. In contrast to the extravagant love of the woman, Simon is calculated and stingy, right? He's positioning and posturing himself so that he can be in control. Simon is tone deaf to the music of the gospel. It's like this, hypothetical situation, but follow me, right? You walk by a room, the door's open, and you look in, and you see someone listening to their iPod, right? Earphones are in the ear, and they're listening to, I don't know, fill in your favorite band, right? Can I dance in chapel? I can't do that, right? They're moving to the music in a pleasant way. They're dancing. Okay, he's dancing, right? He's enjoying the rhythms of the music, right? He's moved along. A deaf person walks by, looks into the room and says, wow, that looks great. Look at that person. They're enjoying themselves so much. The deaf person walks in, sees the guy, whatever. Deaf person thinks, oh, for me to experience this joy before, I got to put these things in my ear. So the deaf person puts, the earbuds in the ear and waits. Okay, that's not enough. Oh, I need to start moving like that person. So the deaf person, starts dancing. Now you've got two people, both with earbuds in their ears, both of them moving like they're dancing. And you look in the room, what's the difference between the two? One hears the music, and the other one is imitating. The dance is the Christian life, and the music is the gospel. And what Simon is doing, the mail order dancing thing, right? Simon is trying to be religious. He has gotten the mail order dancing kit and the feet on the floor, and Simon is trying to ape the motions of a dance. Externally looking like he's obedient, but internally tone deaf to the music of the gospel. When our actions in our Christian life are mere aping of external action, so I look like I'm a Christian, I'm in a Christian community, I want to fit in, I want everyone else to know and actually maybe even be impressed about how much I'm advancing in this Christian life. The great danger is that internally there is no music. What happens to that kind of person over time? What happens to you if you're aping Christian actions in a community, but you're not internally hearing the sweet music of the gospel? Our hearts grow cold. We come to a judgment, this doesn't work. God has failed me. Yeah, and we end up walking away. Simon is like that deaf person trying to ape the motions of a dance, but never hearing the sweet song of the gospel, never internally transformed. Sadly, I think we're often like Simon, trying to perform dance steps, trying to perform externally without being internally transformed, without hearing the music of the gospel. Well, here at the end of the story, after Jesus was looking at the woman and excoriating Simon, right? Basically looking at her with tender affection and saying, Simon, you failed to give me these signs of welcome and hospitality. At the very end, Jesus then finally turned, still looking at the woman, and then speaks to her. And she hears what both the woman and Simon had wanted to hear from Jesus. Verse 48, then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. You see, it's pretty simple. The resolution or the fix or the solution to both the woman's problem and Simon's problem is the same thing. Whether deeply irreligious and have run away from God, or deeply religious and manipulated God, the gospel of Jesus Christ is the one answer. It took me a very long time in my Christian life to figure out that there isn't one way to run away from Jesus. There are two ways to run away from Jesus. It was very obvious that I could run away from Jesus by being very, very bad, right? By being sinful by embracing things I ought not to embrace, loving things that God himself does not love. I could run away from Jesus by being very, very bad. But what really struck me is that we can equally run away from Jesus by being very, very good, by tenaciously holding to religion, by being proud of our theological conservatism. It's just another way of running away from God, keeping him at arm's length, being Simon or being the woman of the city, both ways of being desperately broken. One is obvious, the other one is subtly, deceitfully hard to ferret out. We started considering Luke 7 by thinking about Simon's preoccupation with appearing. He's preoccupied with appearing to be competent. He wants to be seen as religious. And Jesus unveils Simon's idol. I'll call religion an idol. An idol is something that you think you can't live without, right? An idol is something that you find yourself thinking about constantly. And it's in a place like this. The danger is that of Simon, maybe more than the woman of the city. We're tempted to idolize the very thing we're studying here, the very thing that we hold precious. Simon was fiercely committed to being religious. His moral rectitude and his theological accuracy were more important to him than the woman of the city, and even more important to him than Jesus himself. At the end of the passage, did you hear what Luke says in the words of Jesus? Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, and her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. That's an interesting connection between love and forgiveness. Little love is demonstration of little forgiveness. The woman is overflowing with gratitude. Many commentators think that this woman has had an interaction with Jesus that Luke hasn't told us about. Something has gone on between Jesus and this woman such that she has received forgiveness. She has received the thing that she wanted most. And what we're seeing here is a description of her overflowing, extravagant, grateful-filled love, because she has experienced, she's heard the music. And when you hear your favorite music, you've got to dance. It moves you. It starts to pulsate in your head and your heart, and your body starts to follow. That's what the Christian life should be. We're so moved by the beauty of Jesus. We're so moved by his grace toward us, his wisdom, how he cares for us, that we begin to move. Not because we have to, but we can't not. A closing illustration to bring this home, right? So the big idea here, the main idea, the central thought is this, is that a lot of people here today, you might identify with the woman of the city. You might identify somebody, you know what, I know my life has been a wreck. I'm out of control. I'm coming to Jesus broken and battered, and I'm grateful. I'm just glad to be here. Lord, I'm glad that you haven't turned me away. Maybe you identify with her, and look how Jesus responds to her. Jesus receives the welcome and the love that she expresses. So if you're here this morning and you're identifying with the woman of the city, come to Christ. Lavish on him your grateful love, and he receives it. And he says to you, you are forgiven. Right? But I think a lot of us here might be the cagey Simon, right? Thinking about, well, I'm not like her. Oh man, if that happened in our heads already, we're in trouble, right? Pointing like that person. Here, I think the message for us is if you identify with Simon, then I think the idea here is that let the Holy Spirit, let God maybe point or press or poke you in your life and your heart to see, what am I really trusting in? Where is my confidence? It might be helpful to distinguish between confessional trust and functional trust. We're in a great place. We confess good things here. We've got great theology. We confess our trust in Jesus Christ. So our confessional trust, I think, is probably secure, but I worry about our functional trust. When the rubber meets the road during our day, What am I really hoping in? My accurate theology, my degree I'm working toward, the family that I'm a part of, the great church. We're not like those churches, right? We're Presbyterian, man. Oh, wait, no, right? Where's our functional trust? Right? And the message is, or the challenge is, Jesus is saying, hey, look, root out even those idolatries. Sometimes I think we get this wrong impression that being a Christian, the longer you're a Christian, the less you sin, the better you are. But here's an ironic thing. The longer you're a Christian, your eyes get more attuned, right? You see more sin in your life. It's not like you're getting more sinful the longer you're a Christian. It's just you see more. Ken Birding gave me a great illustration. He talked about how his bathroom, the vanity lights in his bathroom were going out one by one, right? And he was not replacing them until it was very dark in his bathroom. And he thought, this is crazy. I've got to go to Lowe's and find, he got these 100-watt light bulbs and put them all up on the vanity. And then all of a sudden, the room is bright. Behold, the Birding bathroom. But then he looked at the sink, and it's filthy. And he thought to himself, how on earth could I be using this sink? It's disgusting. I need to clean it. That's the Christian life. The more we walk with God, the more we see His utter holiness. We realize His beauty, His glory. And in the light of God's glorious holiness, we see more and more of our sinfulness and brokenness. And sometimes we've got the wrong impression. We think, the Christianity thing's not working because I see more sin in my life. What's wrong? Oh, no, that you're doing it right. If you see more and more brokenness, in fact, because that's the gospel, right? Simple. The gospel is you're more broken than you ever thought. It's worse than you think. That's the gospel. That's the first phrase of the gospel. It's worse than you could have ever thought. And if you think you're better than that, just wait. But we're not left in our despair because the second phrase of the gospel is you're more loved and accepted by Jesus than you ever dared hope. He is the great rescuer of your soul. I think that's what the woman of the city realized, how desperately broken she was, but how loving and receiving Jesus is to her. She got the gospel. Final illustration, a way of misunderstanding the gospel and a way of getting it. And I'm going to use ancient Greek mythology. Oh, boy. So, two stories from ancient Greek mythology, right? Jason and the Argonauts, remember them? And then Odysseus. Both of these guys go on a journey, right? Jason and first Odysseus. Odysseus is on his way home. He's on a home-going journey, right? And he's sailing along, and he comes to a point where he knows he's going to hear the siren songs. Remember the sirens? They look like beautiful women, and they sing this incredibly enticing song, but once your ship wrecks on the rocks of the shore, they turn into these demonic creatures that kill you and eat you. It's awful. But Odysseus wants to hear the song. So what does he do? He lashes himself to the mast of the ship. He puts wax in the ears of all of his oarsmen, and he says, row as close as you can get. Odysseus comes close. All of the oarsmen, they can't hear, they're just rowing. And Odysseus is tied to the mast, and he starts to hear the song, and it begins to drive him mad. He pulls against the cords. He wants so desperately that thing, right? The thing that will destroy him. Sound familiar, right? You love the very thing that destroys you, that's sin, right? But Odysseus is trying to, I know he's not a Christian, right? But he's trying to live the Christian life through moralism. I will make myself stay here, even though that's where my heart is. So many times Christians live their life like that, not hearing the right music, loving the wrong kind of thing, but out of a sense of moral fortitude, I will hold myself steady. That does not hold, because Odysseus begins to go mad. You see how that's an illustration of not how to live your Christian life. But Jason and the Argonauts, right? Another voyaging story. They're leaving home, going on a journey, and they too sail very close to the song of the sirens. And Jason had prepared well. No tie, no earwax or earplugs. But as Jason and his band sails close to the sirens, they begin to hear the song. And immediately when they begin to be drawn by this destructive force, Jason asks Orpheus, his friend, to begin playing. Orpheus was the most skilled Greek musician of the ancient world. Orpheus begins to play songs and sing songs of home. And all of the men listening begin to sing along with Orpheus. They begin to remember who they are. They remember that they're longing for their homeland, even as they're on a journey, and they sail right by because they have heard a more beautiful song, a more compelling, a more beautiful picture of reality. That's how we live our Christian life, hearing the music of the gospel, hearing the sweet forgiveness of Jesus, seeing his beauty that draws us to love and listen to the right music.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.